Good morning, everyone. This is Margie Dean Gray, the director of the foundation here at beautiful Fort Lewis College. I have a real treat today for you all. We have two people beloved by everyone in the community, and I'm sure you know who they are, but we're hoping we're going to find out a few little secrets about them maybe today that we don't know. So this is Dr. Duane Smith and Mrs. Gay Smith, and they're going to be joining us today. Duane, as you all know, loves to tell us about history, and especially the history of baseball, which we'll get into a little bit later. And so he will be probably the predominant one that we're going to be interviewing today, but Gay said she'd be willing to do it as well. And we're hoping we're going to find some really good secrets from her. So anyway, so let's get going on this wonderful interview. So Duane, you know, you've just recently retired, and so you were really sort of I would say the new kid on the block, but in your case, maybe the older kid on the block. I didn't say old, I said older. And so how long, I don't really know how long you've been a professor here.
A long, long time. Margie, I came in 1964, which adds up to 49 years.
Wow, 49 years. Isn't that amazing? What made you decide you wanted to go into teaching?
Well, I started in graduate school at CU up in Boulder, University of Colorado, and I enjoyed doing the research and writing so much. I just kept going, got my master's, got my PhD, thanks to my editor. I always kid people. I said I sleep with my editor, which sounds bad, but anyway, she's my wife. And so in 1964, I finished dissertation, and I looked around and sent out letters to 4 schools. And we had been through Durango before and liked Durango. I didn't know much about Fort Lewis College, but I liked the area. And so we just responded and said, yes, we'd like to come down for an interview. Came down for an interview, and I was offered the job.
Wow. So you hadn't taught before you came to Fort Lewis?
I was 4 years as a graduate assistant. So I wasn't in charge of a class, but I graded the papers. I had discussion sections, or what's also called quiz sections. And if the main prof wasn't there, then I gave the lectures.
Pretty scary for someone so young.
Well, I don't know about that, but at least what it did, it was like warming up in the bullpen to get out in the real world. And so I'm glad I did it, because otherwise I've seen people come here who've never given a lecture, never really conducted a class. And at the same time, you're trying to take on a new job. That's an awful burden to take, so I was very glad I had that. Mm-hmm.
Well, I have to say you are a fabulous professor. I have to tell you a little story, and this isn't, I think Duane probably knows this, but Gay may not. You know, we do a lot of traveling in the foundation around the state, and actually around the country, meeting with our alums, and one of the questions I always like to ask is, who was your favorite professor? And I will tell you, 99 out of 100, I'm sorry it's not the full 100, but, you know, occasionally there's another good professor that's, you know, stands out too. But they always say you, Duane. And I think that is such a compliment to you for all the years that you have taught at Fort Lewis, that it has continued, that you are such an outstanding professor and a good friend to these people too.
Well, it must be one of two things, Margie. Either A, I pulled the wool over your eyes for all those years, and B, the question is, I thoroughly enjoyed teaching. I enjoyed the classroom situation, and not every student obviously ended up loving me. You didn't talk to some of the others, but
that was just that one.
Just that one, yeah, okay. But no, I thoroughly enjoyed teaching here, and I enjoyed the classroom situation. I loved the give and take, so it was a perfect fit. And even though I had opportunities to go elsewhere, this is such a nice town to live in, and the school has certainly grown since we came. And I don't want to make anybody feel bad, especially some of my alumni friends who were here in the 60s, but this is a much better school today. Standards are much higher. So I always kid them around a little bit. I said, well, if you came today, they wouldn't even probably let you in, but they don't mind. So
though I have to tell you, these people that I go up to meet, they all have said the same thing. I couldn't get into Fort Lewis nowadays because of the selective standard that we have. But every one of them came in here probably not as prepared as they should have been for college, came out because of people like you, it really with strong foundations educationally. And everyone I have met, to be honest with you, as an alum in Fort Lewis, has been very, very successful. So you should take some ownership of that.
Well, thank goodness for that. Let's put it that way. No, the students were good. They were good at that age in the 60s and 70s, and they're obviously better today. But there again, we're talking about apples and oranges here.
Mm-hmm, exactly. So let me ask you a few questions about your life as a professor. you don't sort of wake up one morning and say, I think I'm going to be a professor of Southwest history. Is this something that you liked as a younger man and decided that this is an area you wanted to go into? Or how did you decide on this road for yourself?
Well, I always loved history. There's no question at all about it. And when my dad came back from the war, he'd been a Japanese prisoner throughout the Second World War. And he was stationed briefly in Maryland, Bethesda, Maryland, and we visited a lot of Civil War battlefields, and I became hooked on history. I loved history, and let's face it, history was my easiest topic. I can sympathize with people who don't, but because I can't do a foreign language worth a hoot, but history, dates, and names just stick with me. Mm-hmm. And so it was easy for me to do it. I loved doing it. I loved when I got in the research. I loved that. I loved the writing, and so that's why I'm in history.
Mm-hmm. Well, you certainly
I was one
do.
of the lucky ones, Margie.
Well, that's true. A lot of people can't get into a field where they are so passionate about it. Now, speaking of research and passions and that kind of thing, I happen to know that you are a big Chicago Cubs fan, and that one of the courses that you teach, and I want to hear from Gay on this one as well. One of the courses you teach and taught at Fort Lewis is it the history of baseball?
No, it's called Baseball and the American Dream.
Okay,
but
so tell us a little bit about that, because that's really it's history. So that ties in certainly with what you are as a historian, but a little different.
Well, actually, we weren't the only school in the country that has baseball. It's a small area of history, but there are baseball historians. And what I did in my class, we studied baseball from all ways. We studied baseball in movies. We studied baseball in literature. I would sometimes have baseball players come in and talk about it. I always kidded the kids during spring training, they better race down to Arizona because that was part of the class. And it was amazing. I'd see them down there. And, of course, I always told them if you wanted an A, you had to be a Cub fan. And if you didn't want an A, you could be any other fan you wanted. I didn't care.
How many Cubs fans did you have?
Well, it was amazing. For at least the class, I had the whole class full of them.
Hey, that sounds pretty good. I'm a Cubs fan.
Yeah, see? Oh, you'd just sign up.
Give me an A?
Yo, heavens no, but I'll sign you to drop an ad. So.
That sounds good.
So, and we studied just every aspect of baseball you could possibly study. And we studied the rules, and of course, jokingly, but we actually did the final. We played a baseball game by 1873 rules, which and we used a little league softball, but they used wooden. We used wooden bats, and you couldn't lead off, and we used. Basically, we didn't use one rule, which they had in the 1870s. That was if you threw the ball to runner and hit him between the bases, they were out. But they could call for a high or low pitch, and they used the rules back then, 4 balls, 3 strikes, so that they got a little taste, and we always had pop and things like that. Mm-hmm. And we played it out in a softball diamond, and it was the best final I think I ever gave.
I think what a great fun thing to do, and that's something that I'm sure they will always remember.
I hope they will. Of course, they wrote research papers and did they read books and did reports, both orally and written. So for those people who thought, well, my gosh, that's a class to take, you don't have to do anything except sit around and talk about baseball, we did more than that.
I'm sure you did. I'm sure. So, Gabe, what have you thought about his passion, especially for the Cubs? Because I've been to your home, and I've seen a lot of things around your house that refer to the Cubs. In fact, I was down in Phoenix this past weekend, and I saw something about the Cubs. I thought, oh, doggone, I should try to get this for Duane. But so is this a passion he's had ever since you've known him?
Yes, it is. Since he was in Illinois, he grew up in Illinois, and so he developed the passion for them then. And then he moved to Colorado, and it continued through college, and to this day he has been a Cub fan, and I had to become one too.
Yeah, I would suspect if you're going to stay married to Duane, you'd have to become a Cubs fan
you
and stay one.
To be, yes.
Well, actually, one of the most fascinating things I did, I got a press pass to go down spring training, so I got to interview players. I got to have lunch with Harry Carey and his wife, and or the late Harry Carey and his wife. So. And I got to sit in the press box, and it was entirely different. And I wrote articles about baseball for the Herald when I was down there. Not a game report because you could get that in the paper, but just various human interest type stories. So I got to be a Cub fan from all aspects. And I always kid with people because when my dad came back from the war, and I didn't really remember him because he'd been gone since '39 and been a prisoner of war throughout the war. So he asked me what I wanted to do, and I said I want to go. I heard the Cubs on radio, so I wanted to go see a Cub game, so he took me to a Cub game, and I learned what it was to be a Cub fan because over the next 3 or 4 years, we went to 14 games. He lost them all.
Oh, my goodness.
So,
and that didn't discourage you?
No, not at all. Yeah. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Then you were definitely a Cubs fan.
Yes.
I mean, when you go through that many games and they
don't
win.
I didn't know what to do on the 15th one when they won. It was just, bye.
I know that, you keep saying that you want to see one more pennant win.
I want to see one. I want to see the Cubs win one pennant win, and let alone they haven't won a World Series since 1908. So, but I'd be happy if they just won the pennant.
Right.
I'm not overly greedy.
Yeah, that's right. Let's one step at a time.
Yes,
tiny
right.
steps. Well, I'm sure the whole audience knows what a prolific writer you are. And I know, as you mentioned, your editor is with us today as well, and I'm going to ask Gay a couple questions about editing your work. But how many books have you actually written?
Well, I've written, I have 55 published books, and some of them are, some are straight histories, various types of topics in history. They aren't all the same. I have baseball, one's a baseball history. But anyway, I've got 2 in press right now, and I've done Colorado history, Civil War history, baseball history, biographies like Horace Tabor, and I did one on the Ballad of Baby Doe the Opera.
Oh my goodness,
that was fun because I got to meet a lot of the stars.
Wow.
In the Ballad of Baby Doe, and Beverly Sills, of course, was the best known one. She sang as Baby Doe, not at Central City, but corresponded with her, and she was very nice, talking about what the opera meant to her.
So did you ever think about writing fiction?
I can't handle dialogue. Sometimes I think my history is fiction, but I just can't handle dialogue. I know that.
So you mentioned that Gay is your editor.
Yeah.
And I know that because you and I worked on the Centennial book together, and she was a very prominent part of that book. And so, Gay, when you read his works even though I know he's have 55 books published, but read his next 56th book, is it like, oh my gosh, same old, or I can't wait to read this because I think it is just going to be crackerjack?
May I interject something? Is this a family program? You don't want her to answer that.
I know it will be different in some ways. In some ways, they are similar. They have the various characters and the scenery and so forth. But they are different, too. Yes, they are.
So do you edit them differently? Do you think? In other words, when you
No.
go... No, so it's all the same thing.
Yeah.
Well, I have to tell you, he is very lucky to have you as an editor. It's not fortunate. I mean, it's fortunate that you have found this wonderful woman to not only share your life, but do the editing for you as well.
You're absolutely right. And, of course, as my former students know, I can't spell a lick.
Is that right?
Well, that doesn't matter anymore. He
spell
forgets
check.
that because the computer takes care of that.
Well, that's true. But I think because you understand how he writes and the kinds of things he writes, you can give him background like, it was a little off, or that was perfect for this, or, you need to be a little stronger or something because, I'm sure you could probably write one of his books because you edited so many of them. You probably, you could co-write. Have you ever thought about co-writing?
I do not write.
Uh-huh.
I cannot. I frankly cannot write something just... They say write this, and I can't write it. If it's a test and I have to write it, I know it. I know the answer, so that's fine. But just to write,
That's something you want to kind of stay away from, huh?
That's right.
So do you have a favorite book of yours that you sort of pull out from all of the 55 that you've had published that you think, oh, yeah, this is a goodie?
A favorite. That's like the people who ask me, what's your best book? And I always say it's going to be the next one, I hope. I hope all of them get a little better because you learn from each one of them. Favorite book? Well, my first one was obviously Rocky Mountain Mining Camps, and that's a favorite. The Horace Tabor book. Some of these books open up doors. People read them, and they know who I am, and that opens up doors that wouldn't have opened up otherwise. So really, it's kind of hard, Margie. It's not that I just... I never really thought about a real favorite one. I enjoyed them all, and I hope I'll enjoy the next one. So,
Gay, do you have a favorite one of his?
Horace Tabor is my favorite.
And how come? Because you both have mentioned that as being sort of right in the very top. Why that one in particular? I want to hear from both of you on this.
Well, for me, it's because he was a very interesting man in Colorado history. And so many people have never even heard of him. And I just think it was important that it be on the market.
That's wonderful. That's great. And what about you?
Well, I enjoyed it thoroughly because obviously Horace Tabor, mostly people think what they think of Baby Doe and Augusta and the marriage triangle or the love triangle and all this, but there was much more to that man, and he was so fascinating because he's not only in Colorado, he was in Arizona. He was involved with, against John Brown in Bleeding, Kansas, and
Wow.
yeah, it was one of the best because I researched all over, and I brought the real. I hope, knock on wood, I brought the real man out, not just the stereotype one that they get with Baby Doe and Augusta. And by the way, in the love triangle, I do favor Baby Doe and Horace, and she favors Augusta.
That's it. So, have you ever had any fights as to who? No, she's shaking her head. No.
Oh, okay. Well, she's changing it, but that's all right. We won't get in a fight here.
No, we don't want to do that.
No,
absolutely. So, if you're just tuning in, this is Margie Dean Gray, and you're tuned in to Duane Smith and Gay Smith. We are very happy to have them on the show today, and they've been giving us little tidbits about their lives in the past and all the things that they've been doing. You both are very involved in the community, and I want to sort of talk about that as well. Duane, you in particular with, in fact, the soccer field up here on the campus has been named after you. And so there's got to be a reason. They just don't sort of pick a person's name out of the hat and say, hey, I think I'm going to name this after this person. So tell us a little bit about your background in with the community and also especially with sports, since that's something you love.
Well, when they name a sports field after you, normally you're dead. I was a little bit scared about that one, but when I came, Durango's a beautiful location, and we didn't have a Parks and Forestry Board. We had parks, but it was just sort of a hit and miss sort of thing. So I helped organize the Parks and Forestry Board and served on it for 35, 40 years. Wow. I don't remember now. And we worked hard at the parks in town. We got the riverfront parks, for example, just all over town, because to me, every part of Durango should have a park. You should have my great idea was, and it just wasn't mine, but there ought to be a park within walking distance of your house. Now, there are various types of parks. There are regional parks or local parks and things like that. So we did get going on that, and I must admit I was thunderstruck when they decided to name the soccer field after me. But that's one of the things I'm most happy to have been involved in, because quality of life is important. Durango has a great quality of life, and you need to have parks. We're getting more apartments and people who don't have a lot of open space. So these parks in all end of town, just not in one certain area, but over on Crestview and down the southern part, in the northern part, all over. So actually, I think we have a park of some size or another within walking distance of everybody.
That's great. I mean, really, when you think about it, the people who don't have that experience of having a park near them, they think how much they lose.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it really is sad.
Well, living in Colorado, you lose a tremendous amount, because why do you come here? Mm-hmm. And one of the things we really were pleased with was that Riverwalk, that one.
So were you part of that as well?
Oh, yeah, I was part of that one, too.
And so, Gay, what do you think of his accomplishments? Not only as a wonderful professor, but a writer, and in developing the park system here that we have.
Well, I think it's wonderful. I really do. And if he hadn't done it, I would guess that someone else would have. But he took it by the horns, and he really got the things that were needed, and that's what was important.
Mm-hmm. Well, really, I mean, I think part of the reason people move here is because of all of the parks and the green space and the trees and that kind of thing. And I think how barren it would be, for all of us if we just had concrete,
All you have to do is look at the first pictures. We had one picture with one little tree sticking up down along the river. And this was semi-arid, really. Even the river was what made it more than that. But, I mean, we basically live with rivers and water in the valleys, but most of the rest of it's semi-desert or desert, period. I mean, it's just or mountainous. So it's a wonderful place to live, and there's so much opportunity. And the thing that I stumbled into was the history hadn't been done. It just hadn't been done. I mean, I just fell into it. And I'm glad I fell into it. But it just always amazed me that someone hadn't realized that we have the railroad. We have, if you look in this valley, I don't want to give you my usual lecture, but
no, it's fine.
If you lived in this valley, the entire American West came through here, starting with the obviously prehistoric Puebloan folk, and then the Utes and the Spanish and the fur trappers and the miners, the railroad builders, the town builders. I mean, they're all here. And even the military's here after we're named after the Fort Lewis. So, and it always amazed me, why hadn't someone written a history of Fort Lewis?
Did you ever try to find out if anybody had done something way in the past? That maybe
They had done a few little short articles,
but nothing
one thing we
substantial.
did was get the military records. I was really proud of the Southwest Center because we are one of the great archives in this Four Corners area. People don't really realize what we have over there, but I was director of that one. I don't want to pat myself in the back, but that's one of the things I worked hard for, to get original materials from this, or copies of the government archives here.
And as you said, we're one of the best in the country, maybe even the world. Especially
Well, I wouldn't go quite that far.
Well, it's
you
the
can,
Southwest
Marty.
history, maybe.
Okay.
So anyway, you all have obviously spent so much of your life here at Fort Lewis and have made such a difference to our students and to the faculty and to administrators and everything else. And I just feel so blessed that I've met you all down the line, and what an amazing honor it was for me to work with you on the centennial book, Duane. No, seriously. And though you and I would talk to each other at 6 a.m. trying to figure out what we were going to do for that particular day, that was always a great part of my morning, was talking with you and just hearing about what you know about, because you know so much about the history of so many areas, and I just have learned so much, especially since I'm not from the Southwest. And so every time I was with you, I learned something new and exciting, so thank you.
Well, thank you, Margie. And it was fun working that book.
It was
and
fun.
I'm glad we got it out, because that's something important for the students. Anything I did on Fort Lewis, it's important for our alums.
Mm-hmm.
And that's I'm preaching to the choir, but that's our base.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Without the alums, what do we have?
Yeah, well, pretty sad, actually, if
Yes.
we don't have the alums coming in. So how would you compare your life as a professor, let's say now in the 2000s, versus when you first came on as a young guy and, full of vim and vigor, as they say? And have you seen a difference in the students?
Oh, as I said earlier, the students, and I don't want to insult anybody, but the students are so much better prepared in so many different ways, and partly it's due to the educational system, and partly it's due to television, and they just are playing better, and they're a joy to work with, but they're also a challenge because they learn so much visually as opposed to lecturing. So you've got to really be careful. I use slides. I still use slides. And in fact, I did last night. I was up Silverton talking to the folks who are going to run the 100-mile race.
Oh, right.
And I was giving them a slideshow lecture. I'm the only person who uses slides anymore, but I got them, so I'm not going to change things around. But it's using video, things like that. You've got to do it because they're so visually attuned, and so I think my teaching changed over the years. You just can't be stagnant. I couldn't have walked here in '64 and been doing the same type of teaching in 1994.
Mm-hmm. Well, how do you think it has changed? I mean, has the interest in history changed for these students? I mean, are they coming in with more excitement about history, or is it again still up to the professors to try to get that excitement going?
I have a saying that goes along with that. History's not dull, but writers and teachers of history are dull. So you've got a good topic to talk about, and the area, Colorado history, Four Corners history, all these things, even baseball, fascinate people. And I know some of my colleagues think baseball, but I also taught Civil War, and I've taught various types or subjects here at Fort Lewis. And the Civil War was really what hooked me on history in the first place. Mm-hmm. And I've edited my great-great-grandfather's diary and hope to have that published. And you never know, but once you get the books in press, I got a couple in presses, then you know they aren't going to back out.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, absolutely. I know that you participate, I don't know if you still do, but you have for years participated in sort of a, wearing the outfits of the Reliving the Past. And Gay, I don't know if you get involved in that as well, because I know that I've seen women going over to the Strader with their gowns on that they would have worn back in the 1800s, and
just a little bit. Once in a while, I will dress up, but I don't really care for it for me personally. But I try to cooperate when it is necessary.
Right, exactly.
Oh, I have fun. I mean, if you're going to be a teacher, you've got to be somewhat of an actor or actress. You've got to.
Absolutely.
Because that's what teaching is, in a sense. in a small sense. I know what some faculty would say to that one, but I thoroughly enjoy. I get dressed up, and sometimes I role play. Sometimes I just get dressed up in Victorian outfit. It's really pretty hot
I bet.
on the hot days because obviously, most of the stuff, especially my coats, my long coats, are all wool. And so it's not a great deal of fun, but it is fun to do it. And I think it's just another way to teach history and hook people on history, and that's what I try to do.
So how often do you do this? Do you have a group that you do this with?
There's a group that we split we've gotten a little feuding and fussing, but so they actually split in a couple groups. But, for example, in October they have what's the name of that, Gay, do you remember? I don't know, it's a real big weekend. We won't be here this year because we'll be at the Western History Conference, but and if a group wants us to come and talk, present style shows, that's what they typically do. They do a style show while I do some history, things like that.
How fun.
It is fun.
That is great. So that's kind of a nice thing to be able to do.
Again, we're trying to hook people on history because there are a lot of people who had bad history teachers, and I don't want to point my fingers, but I know what happened when I was in high school, and we had the coaches teach the social studies, and one of them was an abomination. And that's in my class, because in this little Illinois farming town, there weren't that many out of the 43 that went to college. And so that was the last history class they had, and so most of them don't like history.
And probably don't understand it because they haven't gotten that.
No, they don't.
You know.
They don't really, because if you have to, get back to that point, if you have to memorize the facts to put into the questions at the end of the chapter, and that's all we did. I mean, he would say, okay, read the chapter and answer these questions. Well, you answer the questions, then what do you do? I mean, you've learned a bunch of facts. What do the facts mean?
Right.
That was I didn't realize, I mean, I was a snap. I could do half asleep. But later on, I began to realize what history really was, and that's where my classmates and a lot of people from my generation didn't get the benefit of going on and having some good teachers.
So if you were to start it all over again, Duane, would you still be a professor of history in a college level?
Sure. It's a good life. It's a great life. Where else can you get 2 weeks off for Christmas and the summer off? And if nothing else, I hear people mumble and moan about the salaries, but where else do you get that kind of vacation? I know, get back to my high school class, they just think I have the cat's meow, most of them. They work 50 weeks out of the year and got 2 weeks off. I worked 30 weeks out of the year, and in between there I was taking off a week for Thanksgiving, 2 for Christmas, a week for spring break, go down and watch the Cubs. And so, I mean, it's a wonderful life. Certainly you can gripe that, well, we don't get paid as much as some other people get paid, but then those other people work 52 weeks a year or 50 weeks a year, and the pressure's on them a lot more than it is on us, because this is not a publish or perish school. And some schools are, like the big boys.
Right.
You either publish or you do perish. I mean, I watched some of my colleagues from my graduate school days who didn't publish.
You have forgotten in what you said that the weeks when you are not employed, you are working.
Well, yes, indeed. I don't want people to think I'm just get up at 10 o'clock in the morning and stay up till midnight. No, I get up early. Well, right now I get up early and take the dogs for a walk at 6:15. As Margie knows, I call her right after I get the dogs back. And no, I'm downstairs working. It's not it's not work. I thoroughly enjoy what I'm doing.
And that's the difference, you know. The difference is this is still a passion for you. You know, if it was just a job, you go, oh, gosh, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. But you look forward to it, and that's really what makes an excellent professor.
Well, I think you might be right. I mean, I look forward to coming to school, and I look forward to having my time off to research and write. In fact, even when I came to school, now, I must admit, sometimes grading papers, and I gave all essay questions because I came out of high school with a distaste for true, false, multiple choice and that. And I think essay questions are better. Some students have a little trouble, but I never took off for spelling and punctuation and even grammar. When you got 55 minutes to write a test, you write it and don't worry about polishing it. I mean, that when you can take weeks to write something, it's not fair. And as I said, I can't spell anyway. So I was just looking for content, but essay to me is the best type of test, especially for college-age kids. And I think the thing I've noticed is that more and more were coming up. Obviously, somewhere along the line, they've had more essay and not multiple choice, true and false, and those fill in the blanks. So, which is good because essay tests make you think a little bit and not just memorize dates. You can look up. As I tell my students, you got to hang your hat. I mean, you got to know that the Civil War was after the American Revolution, before World War I. But I said you can look up a lot of these facts. But why and what happened and what impact it have, or what impact does it have on you? Mm-hmm. And history does have an impact on you. You just can't get away from it. It's all around you.
Do you know if any of your students have gone on, like you, to get their master's and PhD in history? Has anybody, emailed you back or written back?
Yeah, I've got some PhDs and some master's students. Mm-hmm. They came out of Fort Lewis and went on more masters teach because obviously a lot of my students went into teaching, and anymore you pretty well, even in public schools, you pretty well need to eventually get a master's degree, a BA or what have you. Well, that's what we get. It's just not enough. You got to go on.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to thank both of you. You really are such jewels in our community, and you've made a difference really in how the community works and sees itself. And I think the thing I love about both of you is you're very humble. You've accomplished so much in a very short period of time of your life, and yet you would never know how abundantly talented you both are. So I want to thank you both for being part of this interview today, but also just being part of everybody's life here in the community.
Well, let me thank you, Margie, and by golly, I know Zot came through the ceiling. I thought after that statement you might get it right.
It's all true.
But thank you for both of us.
Well, thank you for joining me this morning. I certainly appreciate that. And thank you for listening, and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.